make today.
Okay, Hariom Tatsat. Om Agyanix Minandesha Gananjana Shalakaya Chakshunu Militamina Tasmaya Shri Guruve Namaha. So we want to do chapter 12 today, Bhakti Yoga chapter of Bhagavad-Gita. Chapter 12 itself is called as Bhakti Yoga because the subject matter is Bhakti Yoga. We just put this here, Bhakti Yoga. So in the first 6 chapters, the focus was predominantly on individual consciousness and how that individual consciousness or soul could be realized through the various sadhanas of Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga, Ashtanga Yoga. Then at the end of that section, I like to call it the first wave of Bhagavad Gita, the first thrust of discourse or teachings on yoga. At the very conclusion of that teaching, Krishna exalted or esteemed the yogi above the ascetic, above the Vedic ritualist who's performing various rituals for material enjoyment. He esteemed the yogi above the scholar. And then he said, therefore become a yogi. And then of all yogis, the best yogi, the one who is most linked in yoga, yuktatama was the word to use, most linked to yoga, is the one whose mind always, or whose inner self always abides in me with great faith, and who worships me. Magate nataratmana shadavan bhajate yoma. So his inner self always abides in me. Such a person is filled with faith in me, and such a person worships me. He's the best of all the yogis. Same yuktatama mataha, in my opinion, so his opinion counts for a lot. His Bhagavad-Gita. He is the yuktatama, so most linked in yoga. Yukta means like linked in yoga. Yuktatara, more linked. Yuktatama, most linked in yoga. And then that verse, that was 647, the last verse of that first wave of discourse, that last verse becomes like the springboard, which Krishna uses to jump into Bhakti Yoga for the middle 6 chapters. So having heard about individual consciousness or the individual soul in the first wave of discourse and how that soul could be realized, then Krishna talks about the super soul or the supreme soul, basically God, and how that God is realized through the process of Bhakti Yoga. And there are different degrees of Bhakti Yoga, different motivations for performance of that Bhakti Yoga, but still that Bhakti Yoga, whatever the motivation is exalted, it gives realization of God. And it's the yoga that Krishna advocates for, predominantly in the middle 6 chapters discourse. So chapter 12 is the last chapter of that middle 6 chapters. And Krishna has already in the first wave of discourse talked about these different practitioners who realize the soul through their various sadhanas. In the middle 6 chapters, he's talked a lot about Bhakti Yoga and different types of Bhakti Yogins and how they realize themselves. So the chapter 12 begins with a question from Arjuna. Arjuna wants to know who is the best of these 2 types of persons. So we'll just put Arjuna's question. Evam satata yuktamye bhaktas tam parupasate echa aksharam avyaktam te tesham ke yoga vitam. So Arjuna is asking a question. Of these 2, Tesham Ke Yoga Vitama, who is the superlative knower of yoga? He uses the word, I'll use a different color pen since I got a few varieties here today. He uses this word, it's a nice word, Yoga Vit, and then this word Tama is coming again. So who is the Tama, the topmost, the superlative knower, Vit of yoga? Is it the one, Evam Satata Yuktam Bhaktas Champaripasita? Is it the one who always worships you? Is it he who is constantly engaged in worship of you with faith? The Bhakta? Or is it the one who's always meditating on the Akshara, the Avyaktam, the imperishable, the unmanifest? So which one is it? He wants to know the answer to that. So Krishna gives pretty straightforward answer in 12:2 through 7. So basically he says in 12.2, the devotee is the best. Devotee is best. Maya Veshamano Ye Mam Nitya Yukta Upasate Shadaya Parayopetas Te Me Yukta Tamamata. So Krishna is clearly saying that devotee whose mind is always absorbed in me, Nitya Yukta Upasate, who is constantly engaged in worship of me. Shradaya, he has great faith. Parayopetas, he's endowed with transcendental faith. Tame Mataha, in my opinion, he is Yuktatama. The same word that he used in 647, which was the verse to kick off this whole middle 6 chapters, he uses the same word in his answer that this devotee is best. Yuktatama, he is the most linked to me in yoga. So that's his response to Arjuna's question. Who is the superlative knower of yoga? Krishna says, my devotee, who is endowed with transcendental faith, who is always worshiping me, whose mind is always absorbed in me. And he is Yuktatama, he is the most linked. I should use a different color pen. Anyway. In 12.3 and 4, he mentions about the other persons that Arjuna had inquired about, those who are meditating on the impersonal. Ye chaksharam anirtesham avyaktam paryupasate savitragam. This devotes. Where's the verse? I pull this verses up. I had spent a lot of time with this chapter when I was in Cali, Colombia. So yes, savitragam achintam chakutam. So this other person who meditates on the akshara means the imperishable. Anirdesham means ineffable, not able to put into words, basically. Avyaktam, unmanifest. Sarvatragam, all-pervading. Achintam, inconceivable. Kutastam. Kutastam means whose position is not changing. Because everything in the material nature is always changing. Kutastam means not changing. Achalam, adruvam, fixed in one position. So those who worship that reality, then how do they worship? Saniyam indriya graman sarvatra samabudaya. Their practice is controlling their senses on all sides, restraining their senses from their objects, keeping the intelligence, seeing always equal in all situations, so not looking at good and evil, hot and cold, right and wrong, and keeping the mind equal at all. Sarabhuta hiterata, and this line always is interesting to me. Sarabhuta hiterata means they perform welfare activities for all living entities. Sarvabhuta, for all living entities, they're performing welfare activity. But their process doesn't exactly involve engagement with the world. So just by not being a nonsense, you perform welfare activity for all living beings. That goes a long way. I actually think I want to do one of my Ask an Ex-Monk videos on this. Like, what do you think would help save the world if people would take less seriously the world and more seriously helping themselves? I think the world would be a lot better place. Everyone kind of in their arrogance thinks, they'll help the world by directly engaging with some welfare activity. And not that there isn't a place for that, of course there is. But I've just observed that oftentimes people think they do welfare for the world by convincing others to be on a particular political side of some agenda, while they themselves know they're nonsense. Like on the one hand, you convince them to think like you in terms of, let's say, some political position. But you are drinking and doing heavy drugs. And in other words, if I were to ask you the question, do you think the world would be a better place, honestly, if people were more like you? Like inside and out like you? Do you think the world would be a better place? You have to be really audacious to say yes, for the most part. For some people, it could actually be true. But I would say that those some people are it's a very small minority. I don't think if people were more like me, I definitely don't think the world would be a better place. If they were more like me inside and out, I can't say that honestly, because I know what I am inside. And outside or on your social media, you can show whatever face you want. But at the end of the day, you know who you are. And if I were to ask this question, would the world be a better place if you were like, I think for the most part, people would probably, honestly, if they were being honest, would say probably not. So anyway, point is that just by not being a nonsense, you do welfare for the world. Just by taking responsibility for your own development, insight also, you do welfare for the world, actually. Just like now, even when they want to convince people, for example, how to be vegetarian. So some vegetarian wants to convince others why they should be vegetarian or vegan. So they show the statistic just by one person being a vegan or vegetarian, how many animals are saved, for example. Just by making the decision not to eat meat, how it impacts on a larger scale. They try to give some statistic like that to convince people how much good they can do just by taking responsibility for not eating meat, for example. Anyway, none of the charts really give much comment about that, but it's always interesting to me that these persons are said to be performing welfare activity for the world, even though they don't actually engage so much with the world. Krishna says they also attain me. So in this verses, Krishna is saying that these people are also good. Those who follow an impersonal path, they also attain Krishna. But he makes in 12.5, Klesho adhikateras tesham avyakta sakta chetasam avyakta hikatir dhukam they have vaviravapte. So he says in this 12.5, but those who try to realize the impersonal feature of divinity, then their path is filled with a lot of misery, klesha. There are a lot of klesha in that path, because for those who are, those who have material body, it's very hard to think of something impersonal and concentrate on it. By making the mind so equal that you try to see beyond name, beyond form, beyond qualities, beyond activities. That is very difficult for those who are embodied to do so. So basically in this verse, he's mentioning the difficulty of such a path. Impersonalists undergo difficulty. We can expand on all these particular points, but we're just trying to go through this idea first. Impersonalists undergo great difficulty. And contrast to these impersonalists. So this is Krishna's trying to he's trying to answer the question, who is better? So Krishna's already said the devotee is better. Now he wants to make a case of why he thinks the path of bhakti is better. That's all Krishna's really doing here. So yes, the impersonalists, they also obtain me in a particular feature, but their path is very, very difficult. Whereas for the devotees in 12.6.7, very nice verse Krishna is saying here. How does it start? Yes. Yetu sarvani karmani, mayi sanyasamap. So for those who give all the fruits of their activities, they surrender unto me. Mayi sanyasamat para, they dedicate themselves to me. Ananye naiva yogena, they perform the yoga of exclusive devotion. Mam dhyanyantu upasate, they worship me by constantly meditating on me. Then for those persons, tesham aham samudarta mritu samsara sagara. For those persons, I become the swift deliverer from the ocean of birth and death. You may have seen some picture they have drawn of this, of Krishna. I wonder if they have it in here. I should have picked out this picture. It's a picture of a person kind of drowning in the ocean of samsara. It looks like really dramatic. And they're just like on the verge of drowning in the ocean. Oh, I don't think they have this picture in here. I was wishful thinking. And they have a picture of Vishnu coming down on Garuda. Garuda is like the divine carrier of Vishnu. So you have this picture of Vishnu coming down on Garuda and coming to lift his devotee out of the Mritu Samsara Sagara, the ocean of birth and death. Mritu Samsara Sagara. So Krishna is saying, for my devotee who is dedicated to me, who does exclusive devotion, who meditates on me, gives up all activities to me, that I become the swift deliverer. Bhavami Nachirat Parta. Not taking very long. I myself will personally come and deliver such a devotee from the ocean of birth and death. Maya Vishita Chetasam, one whose mind is always concentrated on me. So in this way, Krishna is saying devotee is best because Krishna, let's say, gets personally involved. So that's very nice. You know this story we may have heard of a Muslim king asking one, let's say Hindu or devotee. I don't know whether this Akbar or something, some stories there. Some Islamic rulers asking devotee, why in your tradition you're always emphasizing how God comes to save the devotee? He is so powerful, why does he have to personally come? He can send any agent to do this also. So this Hindu or devotee priest, he said, I will answer the question tomorrow. So next day, the minister's, devotee minister, he started screaming, help, help, the king's daughter is drowning in the pool. So anyway, I'm probably making like up half these details, but the essence of the story is like this. So the king comes to the balcony and sees that his daughter is drowning in the pool. So he jumps off the balcony into the pool to save his daughter. And then when he picks up his daughter, it's just a wooden doll. And the minister is just behind one pillar looking at everything. And when he sees the king pick up the wooden doll, he walks out and says, so you have so many agents out here that could save. Why are you personally come? Because it's his daughter. So his identity is very tightly tied to his daughter. So he is personally taking interest. In the same way, Krishna has already described this in chapter 9. His ego is very much linked to his devotee, just as his devotee's ego is linked to Krishna. What is that verse? Samoham sarvabhuteshu name dveshosti na priyaha. Ye bhajanti tumam bhakta mayiteshu chapnam. So Krishna is telling that I look upon all jivas in this world with the equal eye. The virtuous person doesn't really get me going. The vicious person doesn't make me upset. I see all with the equal eye. But those who worship me, who perform my devotion, then I am in them because of attachment to them, and they are in me because of attachment to me. So Bhakti creates this mutual attachment, not only the mutual attachment of identity. So the Lord identifies with his devotee, and the devotee identifies with Bhagavan. And so Krishna personally gets involved in the lives of those who are his devotees. Now, for our conventional self, that may be appealing or not appealing, depending on what Krishna wants to do when he personally gets involved. But the idea is that he does, for example, this question comes later in the Srimad Bhagavatam. Why is it that it is saying that devotees are very kind of like poverty-stricken, even though they worship Lord Narayana, who is the husband of the goddess of fortune? And the devotees of Lord Shiva, they seem to have a lot of material wealth, even though Shiva himself lives underneath a tree and is a renunciate. So Yudhishthira is asking this question. He said, this is very bewildering. How is it possible? Krishna is the husband of the goddess of fortune. His devotees are broke. Shiva is living underneath a tree. He has nothing. He's a renunciate, but those who worship him, they're having so much wealth. So how to explain this? So in explaining that, Krishna is telling Yudhishthira, Yasyaha onugrinami harishetadanan. When I show special mercy to my devotees, I take everything away from them. And that way nobody likes them because they cannot provide anything practically. Their family may also reject them. Oh, this guy is useless fellow, he can't do anything anymore. And in that way, they suffer like anything. And they're forced to depend solely and wholly on me. So that's an example of Krishna getting personally involved. That may not be a very appealing, you don't usually say this at the Lotus Festival or, the Pearl Festival, you give this sort of message. But the idea is that one is able to come out of this samsara, which is filled with all these material attachments very quickly because Krishna personally gets involved. And thus Krishna kind of is demonstrating his idea that that the devotee is most linked to him, but in the reality. So that answers Arjuna's question. So in the next section, is it clear? Everything clear? Any questions you have? This okay? you understand. It's straightforward. So the next passage, 12:8 through chapter 12, verses 8 through 12. Krishna gives a gradation of how this bhakti should be kind of practiced. In verse 8, let me see, I'm going to erase some of this. All right, I'm going to erase this part. I think you all have it. Okay, I'm going to erase this part. Need a little space. All right. So verses 8 through 12. So Krishna is basically giving the gradation of bhakti. Gradation of, let's say, application of bhakti. So he's already said bhakti is the best. So he's advocating for bhakti yoga. Now he gives a gradation of bhakti application. These verses are actually a little challenging because different commentators give a lot of different understandings of what all these terms mean. But we're just going to just mention them in brief and not go too much into details. But in verse 8, he says, my eva mana adasva. So just absorb the mind in me. So this is at the top. Absorb the mind in Krishna. This is the most exalted. Kind of like an emotional absorption in God. Emotional absorption is the most profound. Kamsa was Krishna's uncle, and he heard a sky voice saying that Krishna will kill him. So from that day on, he became emotionally absorbed in Krishna. I always give this example, just like when the bully would say, 10 o'clock after school, I'll whoop your butt. And the whole day I was thinking about the bully. So in the same way, he had a emotional absorption. Of course, that wasn't bhakti, it wasn't favorable. But he had an emotional absorption. So that emotional absorption, like Krishna's devotees in Vrindavan, the gopis and the gopas, they have a profound emotional absorption. No, this is the best. But Krishna said, absorb your mind and also fix your intelligence. Intelligence on Krishna. Fixing the intelligence here means, well, I'm speaking mostly from one commentary. It means study of Shastra and the practice of meditation on, so that you, because that is considered most helpful for getting that emotional absorption. You're constantly studying, you're constantly meditating on God with the view of trying to get a more emotional absorption. So this is at the top. This is called as internal bhakti, according to one of our commentators. So one should do this. If you do this, then Krishna says you live in me. Nivashasasi mayeva atra urdvam nasamshaya. Have no doubt that you live in me if you can do this. But if you can't do that, because that's kind of hard, if you, any of you emotionally absorbed in Krishna? We are emotionally absorbed in nonsense. So it's not so easy to do this. So he said, if you can't do this, then you should practice doing this. So he speaks about an abhyasa in verse 9. You should practice this with the mami chamtu dhananjaya, with the desire to come to this level of internal bhakti. So all of this kind of falls in these first 3 points. They kind of all fall under a thing called as internal bhakti. This is according to one of our acharyas that where this section made the most sense to me. So I'm just kind of speaking from this spot. So you become emotionally absorbed, you fix your intelligence in Krishna, that means study, meditation, all these things, or you try to practice that. So this takes a lot of, in one sense, it takes a lot of qualification of your inner life that you can control it and just focus it on the Supreme Lord. But many of us may be somewhat or a lot internally bankrupt. I heard a quote the other day when a friend was saying, I think he said it was from Ernest Hemingway, where the quote was, how did I become bankrupt? And the answer was, at first, gradually, and then suddenly. I love that quote, so funny. At first, gradually, and then suddenly. It's a great quote, because that's generally how you become broke. At first, gradually, spending on this, spending on that, spending on that, not watching it. And then suddenly, where's the money at? So how did you become bankrupt? At first gradually and then suddenly. So similarly, one may discover that their inner life is somewhat bankrupt. You particularly notice this when you don't get much external stimulation, like when the Wi-Fi goes out and you're like in the middle of nowhere and you have to like live with yourself. Even for 30 minutes, it can be quite demanding when you don't have much of an inner life. So when we become so internally bankrupt, at first gradually and then suddenly. So if you're not able to do this, because this requires this type of application requires rather refined inner life. So then in verse 10, Krishna says you can work for him. Work for him. Mat karma paramabhava. Or it actually says do his supreme work. Do his supreme work. Because Krishna says mat karma paramambhava. So you should do his mat karma parama, the supreme work for Krishna. So they say that this supreme work refers to the angas of bhakti, such as hearing, chanting, because these are all they engage you externally. And they're also devotion to Krishna. Madartam api karmani kurvan siddhim avapyasi. Krishna says that doing this sort of acts for my purpose also gives the supreme perfection in verse 10. So these refer to the angas of bhakti that kind of engage you externally. In other words, this first one requires like a lot of power to be able to just meditate on the Lord. But you get like all fidgety. You don't have enough inner life to just sit and absorb yourself like that. So you need some external engagement. So there's hearing, there's doing kirtan, there's cleaning, Krishna's temple, then going out and doing book distribution. You do Krishna's supreme work like this, called Makkaram Padamabhava. This is called external bhakti. It's not, internal and external are not used here. Like internal is good and external is bad. They're just external meaning having engagement of your senses, whereas internal means it's more within, just engaging the mind, intelligence. So our Acharya calls this as external bhakti. So the same Acharya is making point that internal bhakti is like kind of the best. External bhakti, a little. He actually says that doing both of these together is the best. So having an inner life and performing these, this is the best. And then like internal bhakti is like second place, and then just being able to do it externally is like third place. All right. Now, if you can't do that, you got issues with Krishna or something. Then in verse number 11, Krishna says, well, you can do some work, but then you shall offer the fruits to me. Mad Yoga Usher, taking shelter of that yoga that I spoke about in the first 6 chapters, where you do some work and you offer the fruit of that work to Krishna. So then you do that then. Do whatever work you can do, or offer the fruit of that work to Krishna. This is even less potent. Kind of like karma yoga. You offer that. You do that karma yoga. Whatever work you like to do, then you take their fruit and you offer it to Krishna. As if you can't do these first gradations of bhakti. Then he wraps up this section with the most confusing verse ever in Bhagavad-Gita, in my opinion. And there are like many different commentaries on this particular verse. I'm going to erase all this and just write this down. This last verse is a tricky verse. I actually didn't study the commentary before I came down and gave this class. But this part is so bewildering that it just sticks in my mind like a powerful imprint over the years. So in verse 12, the verse says, better, Gyanam Abhyasat. Shaya hi Gyanam Abhyasat, right? Yes. Sorry, just making sure that I'm not speculating, because that tendency is always there. So this Gyanam, so this is the gradation that we heard about. We heard about the mental. I'm just gonna write it like this: internal bhakti, that was the best, and then abhyasa. Abhyasa was part of internal bhakti, but it was like a practice to get that internal bhakti. Then you had the external bhakti right here. And then you had kind of like karma yoga at the bottom. So this is kind of the gradation that we just heard about. Okay. So then he says, Jnanam, this Jnanam is better than practice. So the word Jnanam here, according to one reading of this section, refers to this internal bhakti. So he says this Jnanam is better than abhyasa. Obviously, if you're looking at it like this, then being internally absorbed is better than the practice to be internally absorbed. And Dhyanam, he puts this, slight adjustment here. Are you guys getting this so far? Is it clear? Okay. This word Jnanam here, okay. Back up. So this internal bhakti had 3 divisions, right? You remember the 3? What were the 3? Internal, yeah, but it had 3 parts to it, right? You remember?
Absorbing the mind.
Yeah, absorbing the mind. Second part, fixing the intelligence, right? And then the practice to do so, right? Very good. Okay, I feel better that I'm not just speaking gibberish. It's coming out. So Krishna calls this fixing of intelligence, which includes manana, like meditation and shastra study. He's calling it as Jnanam in this verse, according to one reading of this verse. So he says, better than abhyasa is this Jnanam, where your mind and intelligence are actually fixed, or your intelligence is fixed. And better than this Jnanam is Dhyanam. So in verse 12, he uses the word meditation, which means this absorption, this emotional absorption in Krishna. If you're looking at it from this list, it's clear what it means. But different acharyas give completely different explanations of the verse. It's an extremely confusing verse to me. I'm explaining this verse according to one reading of acharyas, makes it a little easy. So fixing the intelligence is better than the practice to do so. And being absorbed, emotionally absorbed in Krishna is better than just being, let's say, intellectually fixed on Krishna. And then the verse says, because by that jnana, karma pala tyagas. By that jnana, you're able to give up karma pala. Is it? Yeah, karma pala tyagas. Karma pala means the fruit of karma. So our acharya says his word karma pala. Karma pala means desires for enjoyment and desires for liberation. Because when people do sadhanas, whether it's work a job, which is a sort of material sadhana that they do for survival and enjoyment, or they do some sort of spiritual sadhana for getting liberation, that fruit of that sadhana is like that, enjoyment or liberation. But it says by this absorption in Krishna, karma pala tyagas, they give up karma pala. That means they give up the fruit of material processes such as enjoyment. And they give up the fruit of spiritual processes that lead to liberation. In other words, bhukti mukti sprihayavat, pishachi hridhi vartate. Their hearts are completely free from the ghost of enjoyment and liberation because they're completely absorbed in the happiness of Krishna. So there's no question of going after material happiness or liberation. And then Krishna says from that tyaga, from that renunciation of the fruit of work in the form of enjoyment and liberation, shantara nantaram, thereafter they attain peace. You'll see a verse in our tradition that's very popular. Bhukti mukti siddhi. No, what is that verse? Krishna bhakta nishkama anta eva shanta bhukti mukti siddhi kami sakaliya shanta. You know this verse. This verse says, who is a peaceful person? Are you a peaceful person? Are you peaceful? You're peaceful. You're peaceful? Sometimes. At least you're sometimes peaceful. I'm no time peaceful. You peaceful? Sometimes. Oh, you also sometimes. You peaceful? You look peaceful. So this verse is saying, Krishna Bhakta Nishkama, the Krishna Bhakta, Nishkama, he is without desire. Anta eva shanta, therefore he's peaceful. As soon as you get some desire, your mind begins to become disturbed. From the moment the desire comes. Just like suppose you were at Thursday night kirtan. These are single people, but you're already married. But single people, this happens all the time in kirtan. There is not kirtan. They're always looking for their enjoyment. Yes. Some person they can meet in the line, the sadhana line, they can talk to. Hey, it's your first time at Thursday night kirtan. So as soon as you see, oh, this person can be a potential candidate. Maybe you're not thinking like that at first. You see, but you notice they also saw you. Then you think, oh, they can be a potential candidate for a partnership like this. This mind is thinking. So as soon as you get that thought, your mind will be disturbed. Now you're completely not peaceful. You understand? So the devotee is nishkama. He has no desire. So he's peaceful. Because desires shakes things up and causes disturbance in the heart, right? Yeah, no desire is peaceful. But bhukti, mukti, siddhi, kami, sakaliya shanta. That person who is bhukti kami, desiring enjoyment, mukti kami, desiring liberation, or siddhi kami, desiring mystical powers, sakaliya shanta, all of them are not peaceful. So peace only comes when there's a heart that is settled at the feet of Krishna. Otherwise, it's just like a tumultuous hurricane. One hurricane came in Florida recently, right? I don't really keep up with the news so much these days, but there was one hurricane, right? I think Donna Darswami told me it was like a, What was her name? Dorian? Is that a girl's name? Anyway, Hurricane Dorian, and it was what's the numbering system called? Something 5, right? Like 5 is supposed to be like the worst. Category 5, they call it Category 5. So it was like the worst, level of hurricane, and it like wiped out a lot of things, presumably. So as soon as you get any desire, that Category 5 disturbance comes. Yes, Category 5 disturbance comes immediately, isn't it? First it starts off like some swirls, and then you get like really embrace the desire, and then Category 5, boom, 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 disturbance. Whether it's bhukti, mukti, siddhi, externally they're looking like peaceful, but inside their mind is so much disturbance, isn't it? Then they have to take medicines to go to sleep at night because the disturbance is so strong you cannot sleep in the nighttime. Like there's actually a very miserable life. So only devotee is peaceful because his mind is settled at the lotus feet of Krishna. That's like the eye of the storm. So no storm is there, very peaceful. So this verse is saying that those who have this meditational absorption, from that their minds become free from desires of bhukti and mukti, and then they experience peace. So again, this is Krishna's way of advocating for bhakti. He's given a gradation, okay, if you can't do this, do that. If you can't do that, do this. And then he kind of concludes with this verse, which is kind of, again, making the point that if you can get absorbed in Krishna, then you'll become a peaceful person and become happy. Last section of this chapter, 12, 13 through 20, is Krishna listing the qualities of his devotees that make them that make them dear to him. A long list of qualities. You can read yourself this section of Bhagavad-Gita. But he lists a long list of qualities that makes his devotee dear to him. And he concludes the chapter, Yetu dhammamritamidam. What is that? Yatoktam paripasate, shadadhana mat parama, bhaktaste ativa me priya. So he says, those persons who worship me by this dharma amritam, who worship me by this immortal dharma, bhakti yoga that he's talking about, dharma amritam, yatoktam, as spoken by me in this chapter and throughout the middle 6 chapters, really throughout the Gita, shadadhana, imbued with great faith, mat parama, and taking Krishna as a goal, bhaktas, such bhakta, te ativa me priya, they are extremely dear to me. This whole long list of qualities, so you should read them. These beautiful qualities of the devotees that Krishna's mentioning. I was studying this chapter, like I said, in Kali, and one quality that kept sticking out to me is aniketa. Aniketa means a person who doesn't have any residence, or he's not attached to any residence. He can just exist like anywhere. That was really sticking out to me because it's not so easy to do. Aniketa. So you look at the list of qualities, and he said these lists, they make the devotee very dear to him. But then he concludes the chapter by saying, those who follow this immortal dharma as spoken by me to you, endowed with faith, taking me as a goal, then they are extremely dear to me. So in this way, Krishna is very clearly, unambiguously advocating for the performance of Bhakti Yoga. He doesn't go into great elaboration on this Bhakti Yoga in Bhagavad-Gita. But it's clear that his conclusion is that one should become his devotee and worship him. And this chapter itself serves as that evidence, as long as his concluding statements. So you can see all these qualities are very nice. That's the last chapter. Last part of the chapter. That is chapter 12 in a nutshell. Whole chapter covered. 40 minutes. Are there any questions, comments?
Verse 12.
Yes. No. He was putting his head from behind, so.
In verse 12, why again was it? There are different commentaries on it, and not all of them are the same.
Yeah, different commentators, they give different explanations for different ideas that are encountered in Gita. But the language of the verse is a little tricky because Krishna in verse 12 uses terms that he hasn't used in relationship to bhakti just preceding those verses. So he's saying this is better than that and this is better than that. And then in verse 12 he talks about Gyanam and Dhanam, which were words that he didn't use in those previous verses when he was establishing this gradation of application. So therefore, the commentators have to take liberty to what does Gyanam mean in this context? What does Dhanam mean in this context? Within, not only within Bhakti, but within this particular set of verses where Krishna is given a gradation. So if you look at the Sanskrit of the verses, Mayeva Mana Adhaswat, Mayi Budhem Nibeshaya. In all the language that Krishna uses, he doesn't use the word Gyanam, he doesn't use the word Dhanam. And all of a sudden in verse 12, at the end of his discussion on the gradation, these words Gyanam and Dhanam just show up. And then he talks about karma pala tyaga, giving up the fruit of karma, which sounds like the karma yoga mentioned. So it's not very clear where, like he just suddenly threw these terms into the explanation. So therefore, acharyas have to take liberty of explaining what does Gyanam mean here in the context of describing the application of bhakti. The gradation of application of bhakti. Where does this Gyanam mean here? Because that Gyanam term wasn't used earlier. What does this Dhanam mean? That Dhanam term wasn't used earlier. So then they're connecting, or at least the commentary that I followed in my explanation is connecting the word Dhanam to that first part, Mayeva Mana Adhaswat, the mind is absorbed in Krishna. He's connecting the word Gyanam to that intelligence being fixed. And then abhyasa was a word that Krishna did use. So he said abhyasa means abhyasa he was talking about earlier. So I thought.
But it's not like something that could lead to just this total misinterpretation of bhakti. It's like.
No. Well, of course, for the impersonalists, I don't know how they interpret it. I would have to see. I have Shankaracharya's commentary also. See how he interprets all these terms. Because the impersonalists, they like to jump on terms like that. Because that's one thing about Vedic literatures in general is a lot of terms are vague. Or I also call it the pronoun problem of Vedanta. Just like in the modern social political landscape, there's all these pronoun issues. You have to tell what are your preferred pronouns. I told when I went to Berkeley some months ago for a friend's graduation. So the dean of the school, he gave the opening announcements. And he said, my name is Dean so-and-so. It was a guy. He said, my name is Dean so-and-so. I go by the pronoun him, he, and his. And I had a good laugh. I'm like, of course you do. What other pronouns will you go by? But because of the social political landscape, you have to clarify that even though you may look like a man, you may identify as a woman. So you may go by different set of pronouns. Or they have this pronouns, they, zero, and whatever, all these different So this is modern pronoun issue. So in Shastra, they have a pronoun issue also. They always use these generic terms like Atma, Tat, Gyanam, and so they leave themselves to a lot of different interpretation. And as Mahabharata says, Nashavrishir Yashamatamna Bhinna, that you're not considered a Muni unless your explanation differs from other Munis. So therefore, everyone's got these different explanations on these very these very kind of like terse and somewhat enigmatic terms, so it gets very confusing. So you see in persons, they probably jump on the Jnana means here, because Jnana is a word that's often associated with like impersonalism and so on. So the Jnana means this here, and Dhyana means this here. And so the Bhakti Acharyas, they will fight with these sorts of commentaries. Say, no, you got to look at the context of what Krishna's talking about here. He's talking about the gradation of application of bhakti in context, so the words Gyanam and Dhanam can't be interpreted in that way. They will fight like this.
And then their commentaries are also different, but parallel in a sense.
Whose commentaries? The Bhaktas.
Yeah.
Yeah, their commentaries are very, very similar, but they have, according to the way they understand bhakti practice, they will give little differences here and there. There's no mundane contradiction though, but they will make different emphasis, or they may give slightly different understanding with this. And when that happens, when you're explaining commentaries, you just explain this Acharya says this, that Acharya says that, and that in one say just gives you a more complete understanding. If anything, it can help you appreciate the richness of thought available from just one little verse of Bhagavad-Gita. And you say, this Acharya says this, that Acharya says that. Like that. No one really makes a big issue if there's like big, some differences there. They're minor. But they all basically come to the same conclusion that worship Krishna absorb like this.
Good question.
Yes.
6 and 7.
Yes.
Was,
I deliver them.
yeah. So we were talking about Krishna gets involved.
Yes.
It sounds like immediately.
Yes.
But it sounds like when you read it here, he's the swift deliverer from the ocean of birth and death. Like that comes at the end of your life.
Yes. To be delivered from samsara, there's like the final deliverance. You die and you can come out of samsara. But before the final deliverance, you got to get disentangled, right? There's so much entanglement is there. And just like if you're trapped in let's say there's war going on, you were trapped and they have you tied up and everything. So I come to rescue you. But first, I got to get you untied. They got you all tangled up in the thing. So to get free from samsara means you got to get disentangled from all these things that have trapped your mind and trapped your inner life. Krishna says in Bhagavad-Gita, Yanyam vapi smaram bhavam tyajante kalevanam tam tamivaitu-kuntaya sarata bhavabhavita. That according to whatever nature you're remembering at the time of death, then that nature you'll attain without fail, having always caused that nature to be. Sadata bhavabhavita means you're always thinking about that. I gave this exercise, I think, last time I was here in the class, where when you're right before you go to sleep, what is it your mind is meditating on? Because that right before you go to sleep is like death. It's not dissimilar to death. And sometimes you see people sleeping, they look like the soul's left the body, isn't it? So yeah. You see many times, just when I was where was I at? On the airplane. Yes, on the airplane back to the States. And there was one guy sitting across from me. We had a very early morning flight. And as soon as he sat down and see, he was like, it looked like the soul just came out. And then the stewardess came by. I had to like wake him out. They had to like really press him, the soul comes back inside. So when you go to sleep, it's like not dissimilar to death. So what is that final thought right before you go to sleep? You can get a sense of what you might be thinking about when you die. And according to that, that's the state you will attain without fail, Krishna says. That's why devotees like to do a little prayer maybe before they sleep. But even as you're trying to go to sleep, keeping the mind on Krishna. And this is an interesting exercise, not letting it wander to this or that. It's an interesting thing to do. So anyway, our inner life, our mental life is fully entangled in hypocrisy, thinking about so many nonsense things, crazy things. So to deliver you from samsara, you got to be delivered from those things also. It's not just that final moment, but all the previous moments that have captured our mind, our inner life. So he may get immediately involved to start that process also. All right, if this fellow or this, situation is not good, so let me see what I'm gonna do with this one. Let me take this out of the formula. And then because that thing is gone, they start clashing. And they're like, it's over. It's like, yeah, okay, got that one done. Now let's see that other attachment is really good. Take that. Yes. And then you become like, what the heck is going on in my life? And then you're starting to, pray more intensely to Krishna, like, oh, Krishna's like, this is very good. Let me see what others have. And then fully, release from all these things, and you can think of Krishna. Then the final deliverance. Now you're dying, your mind is thinking of Krishna, and then finally delivered. So getting free from samsara is not just a question of final deliverance, but you have to be delivered from all the entanglements that are there. So Krishna's getting involved basically from the outset. Once you get Krishna's mercy in the form of bhakta sangha, devotees take interest in you. Then from that moment, your life will be blessed. Of course, how the blessing looks may not always be totally appealing in the outset, but as you make spiritual advancement, then you'll see how ecstatic it is. So I'm told. And I have faith in that. Indeed. Okay. Any other questions? Is that okay?
Mm.
Yeah. Is it okay? So we finished here, chapter 12, Bhagavad-Gita. Hari Om Tat Sat. Thanks a lot. Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Okay, let me see about this. Oh.